Welcome back to the Boaters Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron, and I work on boats and teach people how to work on their boats with our school community. You can check that out using the links in the description below. Today, we're going to be doing some budget brand tiers. Well, the question is, Sandbuddy says, can you do a tier list of your favorite budget boat brands? Now, I don't know if I can really tier them all that much because I think once you get down to the budget brands, they each have one quality over a better quality or one quality over another quality based on exactly, what it is. Obviously, if it's a budget boat, they are doing something to make the boat cheaper, whether that be less materials when they build it, thinner fiberglass, cheaper wiring jobs, cheaper wire in general, less finishes, smaller engines. There's all kinds of things that they can do to make a boat cheaper. But out of all the budget brands, I'm going to go with center console wise or in the more fishing type setting, not necessarily like wake boats or bass boats or pontoon boats or anything like that. These are going to be more like center console budget boat brands. And I'm going to go with, let's go with Sportsman's in there, Sea Hunt is in there, Sea Pros are in there, Carolina Skiffs, and Duskies. Those are going to be my top 5. Now, if I were to tier them, Duskie's going to be number 1. That's my favorite one, even though they are a little bit more, they're a little bit pricier now, but everything's more expensive these days. So I'm going Dusky, then I'm going Sea Hunt. Sea Hunts are really good. I think the ride quality for what you get is extremely good. Maybe it's not the best as far as the wiring finish job, but as far as the actual ride quality of the boat and the way that it's put together and the layouts and the functionality of the boat, I really like them for that aspect. Now, I'm going to put the Sea Pro next. I think the Sea Pros lately have been really, really good as far as the way they've laid them out. I think they've got a really popular model out there. It's kind of like, the fish family fish type thing. I'm not sure exactly the exact model name, but I think that is a really good, more budget driven boat. So I'm going to go with them. Again, I'm not exactly sure. I like the way that they're laid out. So for the Sea Pros, that's the way I like them. I like them laid out the way they're laid out, with having a live well, having them laid out to where you can use them to fish, but also you can entertain on them. They've got the seating in the bow, makes it pretty nice. The wiring isn't the greatest, but the ride quality and just the way the boat is put together, that's what I'm going to go with them. Number 3, I'm going to put Sportsman after that. Sportsman, I think in the last couple of years have gotten way better than what they were previously. But again, it's a nice budget boat. The wiring, not the greatest wiring, but as far as the ride of the boat and the way they're laid out, I kind of like them. And for the price, you can't really beat them. So I'm going with them, and then I'll go with the Carolina Skiff on the very end. But the Carolina Skiff has nothing to do with really the wiring or anything like that. It's just a cheaper boat because it is like, they come more plain Jane. It's like a one type use boat. It's more plain Jane. There's not a lot in them. They are very like rough finish, but clean finish is what I would say. It's not like they're, completely sanded down, gel coated, shiny on the inside. A lot of them have like the thicker gel coat to where it's like some of them are splattered, and you can see some of the glass, like the way that it's laid up. Not that there's like exposed glass, just the finish isn't completely smooth and finished out as far as the gel coat goes. So that's going to be like a tiered list for me. I guess I could probably put Robalo up into that list. I think that's a pretty good budget friendly brand. I don't know if I would call Robalo a budget boat brand, but as far as those, and I probably couldn't put Dusky in that list anyway because they really aren't really a budget boat, even though out of all the top tiers, I think they're like a mid-tier boat because it's not a CV, but it's not a Bayliner. For what you get, it's one of my favorite boat brands. So that's why I put it in there, because it used to be super budget friendly. It's not as much as it used to be, but nothing's budget friendly anymore. So, I can't really even have an argument one way or the other. I just really like a Dusky. The ride, the finish, everything about them. I'm just a fan of the Dusky. So I put them on that list just for that. But if you're a tier, that's what I'm going. I'm going the Dusky. I'm going the Sea Hunt, the Sea Pro, the Sportsman, and then the Carolina Skiff on the end of that. And then you can put Robalo there as a appendix to my statement. Adam Barris says Boston Whaler holds their value better than any other brand out there. I don't know if I think I'm actually going to disagree with you, Adam, on this note. Yes, Boston Whaler holds their value extremely well. They are in the top 5 of all boat brands that hold their value extremely well. Better than any other boat brand. I don't know if we can really throw the better than any other boat brand in there, simply because Grady White holds their value extremely well. Even some of the stuff from the 80s and the 90s is still holding up on the value. Contender is also a very, very high contender in the boat brand that holds their value extremely well. I mean, it's a very desirable boat. It's a very desirable hull, multiple different models. And then, CV, I'm going to throw CV up in that list as well because they hold their value really, really well. So would I agree with Boston Whaler holding their value better than any other brand? I don't think I would say that. I think that you could put in a basket all those boat brands and say, these are, if you want to buy a boat today, like if you went and bought a brand new boat today, or even like a 3-year-old boat, and you bought a Boston Whaler, a Contender, a Grady White, a CV, any of those, in 10 years from now, it's still going to have a lot of value. In 15 years now, going to have a lot of value. And even in 20 years, that boat is still going to hold its value regardless of the market conditions. I'm sure if you look at, I had another comment in here from somebody that was talking about this. Willie B, says, talking about boats we wanted as kids. For me, it was a Parker. I would throw Parker into that list as well because Parker holds their value extremely well as well. Looking for my next upgrade, and I saw the price of their 2420s has increased 23% just in the last year. If you option it with twin Yamaha 200s, it's around $50,000 more expensive than last year. Blows my mind the old 1720 might just get repowered again. So that same comment there, I'm going to throw that into this whole discussion simply because the expense of everything, or actually no, that's not the comment that I was looking for. I was looking for something else. Somebody in here said something about buying a boat and then it maintaining. Okay, Dennis, this is it. Dennis says, well-maintained boat price is constant through its life. If you paid $80,000 in 2005, it has been updated and well-maintained. It is probably worth around the same $80,000 now. That is for top-tier boats with good reputation. The equivalent boat from the same builder is most likely around $220,000 new in 2025. So talking about that 20-year span, I agree with it. I agree with Dennis to a point. Notice he says has been updated. Now, what does updated mean? Does that mean you repowered the boat or you rewired the boat? Like, if you repowered the boat, that's a whole different discussion because a good percentage of it is going to be, let's say it's got to be 30%, if not 40% in some boats of the boat's value is the engine package. So if you've got, let's say, a 21-foot boat with a 250 horsepower engine on it, the boat might be let's say $90,000. Well, the engine and the rigging is about $30,000. So you're roughly 33%, 35% in the value of the boat is in the engine. If you were to repower it, that value, like you just spent, let's say you bought the boat. What did he say? You bought the boat in 2005. You paid, $80 for it, or even this one, the $50,000 more. What Willie's talking about. And you put $60,000 with 2 new engines on there. I mean, that's the updating there. That might throw in a little kink to the whole theory of it holding its value. But based on inflation, yeah, if you bought a boat for $100,000 today, in 20 years from now, a Parker, Boston Whaler, Contender, Grady White, CV, any of those boats are probably going to be $100,000 in 20 years from now. It probably will be pretty flat. You might need an engine package on there. So if you put $60,000 worth of engines on that boat, I mean, that needs to be factored into your calculation at some point in time because you got to spend that money at some point in time. But for the whole, holding their value, I'm going with that grouping of boats, not to say that one is going to hold their value better than another. And Willie B talking about is, the Parker being $50,000 more with the twin 200s. That's probably it. That's kind of why you buy a top tier boat. That's kind of part of the value. If you buy like a 3-year-old boat, let's say you buy Boston Whaler, Grady White, any of these top tier brands, the repower option is what's going to be the best for you, because like he's saying, the 1720, let's say he's got a 2005 1720. That is an extremely solid boat. If it's been well maintained and the wiring hasn't gone down the drain, then you just repower that boat. It's like you got a brand new boat. You can get away with a lot. Like, let's say you take a Parker that's 15 years old, put a set of new engines on there. I mean, that hull is still a Parker hull. It's going to ride the same. It's going to perform the same, and it's going to be a really solid boat. Same thing for any of those other brands. If you buy a boat and you're in it for the long haul, like you want to hold it for 20 years, then you would buy the more expensive boat, the top tier boat, because then you could just repower it later on. You don't have to go out and buy a new boat. You don't have to, buy a boat for $80,000 and in 20 years then go buy a boat for $250,000. If you could just spend, say, $80,000 and repower your boat, you're basically getting your boat brand new again, because the reliability of your boat, a lot of it has to do with the engine that you got on the boat. I mean, if you got a crappy engine, then, you're just going to get stranded regardless of what boat brand it is. John Chandler says, Suzuki, #1 in corrosion. Better replace those internal anodes every 25 years in saltwater. I think Suzuki has come a long way on their corrosion issues. I think a lot of boat brands have come a long way, or manufacturers have come a long way on their corrosion issues, but corrosion's just a problem in general. It doesn't really matter what brand you buy. Corrosion is something that you're going to be fighting. Internal anodes, yeah, you should definitely be changing your internal anodes. Suzuki's do have way more anodes than some of the other brands on the blocks and stuff like that, and you do need to replace those. So, I mean, corrosion's just corrosion. You're gonna have to fight that no matter what, regardless of an engine brand that you buy. Impartial Interest says, hey mate, I've got a 21-foot heavy fiberglass boat with about 8 inches of beam. I don't know what you mean about 8 inches of beam. You maybe an 8-foot beam, I'm guessing. The transom is rated to 200 horsepower, and the boat was made in the days when 2-strokes were commonplace. I currently have a 2001 2.6-liter V6 Johnson, 175 horsepower, carbureted 2-stroke on it. It goes well, and the outboard is light, 170 kilograms. I'm now considering repowering with a 4-stroke, but I don't know whether to go V6 or inline 4. Both Suzuki and Yamaha offer 4-cylinder and V6 in 200 horsepower. Which would be better? The V6 are obviously heavier and higher displacement and smoother, but the 4-cylinder are lighter and better on fuel. Thoughts? So my thoughts, this is a big discussion. A lot of people have this discussion. It's the old inline 4-cylinder versus a V6. That 150 to 200 horsepower range is kind of your issue of, like you're saying, the 170, it's a weight issue. To me, I look at it as weight. I think there's no replacement for displacement when you're moving weight, especially on a boat. That's why bigger boats, bigger cabin cruisers, big and stuff like that, they have diesels because you get displacement to move weight. Small cylinders and low displacement, high RPM when it comes to a boat, I don't think it equates. It doesn't equate the way you think it would equate when you look at like a car or something like that, because, with a car, you're fighting wind. You're not fighting drag and pushing weight through water. So weight is a massive factor. The heavier the boat, the bigger displacement. That's why you see these outboards, the 600 horsepower outboard, the V10s that Mercury make, the diesel outboards, is displacement, because the bigger boats, the heavier boats with the Seakeepers and all the other stuff that you guys put in the boats, like, they're heavier. You need more power to push them. And whenever I say power, think of displacement, because it's going to be better off with more displacement, not necessarily just horsepower. And also the whole, I think there's actually a comment about this. Udo Man says, why has a 150 horsepower 2-stroke engine more power and 150 horsepower 4-stroke engine? 150 horsepower or 150 horsepower after all. So it's based on your torque, your horsepower, your torque curve, and it isn't really horsepower versus horsepower, because a two-stroke has two strokes. Four strokes has four strokes. It is a more efficient engine being a two-stroke, which means you get more power quicker. It takes less to spin up, and it's just straight up blasting out power. You've also got ratios as far as the gear cases, because you have a, what would you call it? It's a step down, but now the words, I've lost the word that I'm trying to come up with of your gear ratio. You are stepping down, I can't even think of the word. Like if your power head is spinning at 1,000 RPM and you've got a 2-to-1 gear ratio on your lower unit, your propeller is only going to be spinning at 500 RPM. So there's that difference there, the transfer of power. On a two-stroke, you can get a lot more quicker, and it's just you're losing efficiency. What the flywheel is producing and what the propeller is producing is totally different. You might get 200 up here and 180 down here. So there is a loss in efficiency with the gearing, as well as the two-stroke versus four-stroke, because the four-stroke has four strokes. It takes 2 revolutions to create 1 power stroke, whereas the two-stroke just needs 1. So, two-stroke, four-stroke, 1 revolution. So the whole deal is moving of the weight. And if you're going to go from a two-stroke that's creating instant power and 175 horsepower, it's lighter and it is more efficient. So it feels like it has more power, even though it might, the 150 versus the 150, you're talking about a 4-cylinder versus a 6-cylinder. So that's why you would say that the 150 has more power. It really technically, you can't say that it has more power. It's just how it performs based on application. It would be a better thing to say that the two-stroke, based on the application, replaced with a four-stroke with less cylinders, is not going to perform the same as the two-stroke, because the V6 has more displacement and it's instant power. So it's going to hop up on plane better. It will have different performance aspects to it, like the top end might be a little bit different, but it's definitely going to get on plane quicker and it's going to feel quicker. If you go from a 175 two-stroke that's, V6 to a 150, 175, 200 four-cylinder, your fuel economy is going to be, a little bit better, just because you're going from a two-stroke to a four-stroke. But depending on how you load that boat, especially an older, heavier 21-foot fiberglass boat, I would be wanting to put the V6 on there, because based on how you load the boat, if you put 4, 5, 6 people on there, which a 21-footer, you should probably be able to get 6 people on that boat comfortably. Depending on how heavy those people are and how much gear you put on that boat, the 4-cylinder 200, you're going to be running it at higher RPM than you are a V6, based on the performance of the boat, based on the speed, and then how the boat is performing in the water. It's going to be, you're going to require more from the 4-cylinder than you are from the 6-cylinder, if that makes sense, the way that I've just rambled through trying to explain the scenario here. So if it was me, I'd go the V6 200, because the 4-cylinder 200, even though it's going to perform similar to your 175, I think it will not perform as well as the 175, simply because it's got 4 cylinders. You're going to run higher RPM, and if you load your boat up, then you'll probably be putting more strain on the engine, because you're going to have to prop it to perform the way you want it to perform, and you're going to be loading that engine. So if you're running it with it fully loaded all the time, you're going to start having issues like carbon buildup and other things like that. So you're going to need to be running a lot more ring free and other things to prolong the life of this engine, because you're trying to make, I guess the better way of explaining this is you're trying to take a small engine and make it do big engine things. You're trying to take a small truck and make it do a big truck things. Like you're trying to take a Ranger and make it perform like an F-250. That's what you're basically trying to do. So if it was me, whenever I see this situation, I'm going more. Always go more. And, if you don't load your boat up, it's just you, it's a lighter boat, then yeah, you put a 175 4-cylinder, the 200 4-cylinder, you probably won't notice much of a difference because you aren't fully loading that boat with the weight that's going to change the way it performs with that inline 4. Juggle Matt says, can I ask your thoughts on the benefit of doing an annual engine flush with a product to clear calcium deposits like Ridlime? This is in addition to regular flushing with salt away. I'm running a Yamaha F60 with around 1,500 hours. Thanks. I mean, I don't know what thoughts you really want from me because, like, if you're already flushing with salt away, you got 1,500 hours on your F60, like, you're doing great. Like, I don't know if you really need to do a Ridlime, because Ridlime is like a really, really good product. Like, that thing will clean. I mean, it's going to clean your engine. Like, if you've got buildup and deposits in there, it's going to clean it out. So if you're already flushing with salt away on a regular basis, I don't know if you're going to necessarily need to do a Ridlime. Maybe every 3 years, you could put it on like your 300-hour or 3-year services, but I don't know if you're really going to need that, though, based on what you're already doing. Now, if you're not running anything, say you don't flush your engine at all, and you just run it, say, once or twice a week, maybe a couple times a month, then yeah, maybe a Ridlime every year or every other year, that's going to do you some good. But Ridlime is a very, very good product. So it's it's almost like, are you doing damage the more you do it because of how good it is? I don't think you can do damage with it. It's like it's not going to damage your metal. But if you have metal that is eating itself away, then Ridlime is going to clean everything off that metal. So any kind of buildup, salt buildup, blockages, it's going to eat that away. So if you do have a problem, it can expose issues. But I don't know if having a once a year is really going to be necessary for you. For someone else that doesn't flush, yeah, I could see that being a good routine. Unimpressed Aussie says, I accidentally idled my E-Tech 30 horsepower without water for about 30 seconds. Still pumps water. Should I be worried? Thanks. You're kind of like in that gray area. I mean, 30 seconds is long for not having any water to your impeller, but is it long enough to really damage your setup? Probably not. You're probably going to be fine. You may have worn the impeller down a little bit, but 30 seconds is, isn't enough to burn the impeller up? No. Is it enough to break a blade off? Really, you're not going to. When you break a blade off, it's because the impeller's gotten brittle and it just snaps off. Heat is going to melt your rubber. So the issue with running it dry is the impeller gets hot based on the friction of running in a metal cup. When it is dry and, at idle, you're running, let's say idle is, let's say 600 RPM. That E-Tech, based on your exhaust, you might be a little oily, but that's a little lubrication for you. But as far as the heat factor goes, did it get hot enough to melt the rubber of the impeller and compromise it? I'm going to say probably not. Now, do you need to change your impeller on your regular service? Yes. I wouldn't worry about it. If you're pumping water, I don't think it's hot enough. Now, if you run, say, 5 minutes, all right, you're probably not going to pump any water because you melted that impeller. It ran long enough. If you look at a 30 horsepower engine at idle, let's say you're idling at 650 RPM, most likely you've got a 2-to-1 gear ratio. So that impeller, well, there's no gear ratio. There's no gear reduction there, which that's what I was thinking of earlier, gear reduction. So you're running that impeller spinning 650 times per minute. So is that enough time to heat up? You've got your exhaust going out the side there or out right behind it, which heats it up. Now, if you're pumping water, I'm going to say you're good. And then when it stops pumping water, then you start to think about it. But depending on where you're at on your service schedule, your impeller, you did put some strain on it, but to destroy it and have something to worry about, I don't think so. B. Miller, I need to upgrade my Yami 225 to a 300. And would you recommend new or used? I'm in Alaska and it's very hard to find anything decent used, and Craigslist scares the blank. 225 to a 300. So I don't know what 225 you got. If you got a 3.3 liter, I mean, the 4.2 liter is a solid engine. They've been making that thing since, I don't know, like 2014, I think, something like that. So the 300, would I recommend new or used? Used is basically what you can find. You're saying that it's very hard to find anything decent used. And I mean, I don't know anybody that's still using Craigslist. So, I guess that's still a thing. I haven't got on Craigslist in a long, long time to try and buy or sell anything. So, I mean, yeah, I would say it's pretty, but at the same time, there's a lot of people out there that only know things like Craigslist. They don't get into, I mean, but you got Facebook Marketplace. So I don't understand why someone would be using Craigslist versus Facebook Marketplace. There is some sketchiness to that whole deal. But if you can't find used, you can't find used. I mean, there's not really any thoughts I can have on this. I would recommend, new, obviously, but new might not be in the budget. So your budget's what constitutes what's recommended to you. I mean, a new 300 is like 25, 30 grand. So, I want to say you can get the engine for like 24, somewhere around there. And then your rigging's going to be a few grand. So you might be looking at $30,000 out the door for 300 brand new. You might be able to pick up a used one with, say, 800 hours, 600 hours for, I don't know. I haven't priced the 300, maybe 10 grand. I don't know. I don't know what people are getting for them. And especially when you're in Alaska. So finding something and then getting it up there might be your biggest problem. Whereas, you're kind of in an isolated area. So finding something decent might not even be an option unless you drive down somewhere to get it or have something transported. But now all of a sudden you've got a risk factor in there of you're trying to transplant a used 300 from Washington up there. How much are you going to buy the engine for? How much are you going to spend transporting it? And then how much are you going to spend getting it repowered? Once you add up all those factors, you might be close to, maybe it'd be better to get the new engine. I mean, there's a lot of factors there. Just talking through that situation, those are the things that I'm thinking about. So maybe that gives you a little bit of insight or what to think about, or, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Hopefully it helps a little bit, but your situation's kind of like specific, S. Manny says the industry has gone crazy. I saw a dude with a kayak with over $20,000 in accessories bolted onto it. We have all lost the art of keeping it simple. Yeah, people are finding newer and newer ways to get out on the water. I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, with how they deck out the GNUs and the micro skiffs and all this stuff, and the kayaks and the jet skis. People are taking jet skis and then outfitting them with all kinds of, I mean, they're getting, you got GPS and fish finders on there, cooler racks and rod holders and like stereo systems and chargers and batteries and like, yeah, $20,000 in accessories. You got people take a kayak and put all the rod holders on there, the coolers, $300 for a cooler, all the rod holders, putting a $2,000 GPS and fish finder on there. Like, yeah, it is crazy. But I mean, if that's what you like, I don't see why that'd be a problem. If you got the money and you like to do that, then more power to you. I think you should do what you like to do. Southern Marsh says, much rather a used good boat than a new crappy boat any day of the week. Age is not a factor for good boats. To a point. To a point. Things do wear out, especially, think about the environment that your boat is running in. Like we were saying earlier, the engine's 30 to 40% of the reliability of or 30 to 40% of the price or value of your boat. So as long as you got good engine, if you have a good boat, then age is a lot less of a factor. But once you hit like 25, 30 years old, depending on where the boat's at, if we're talking center consoles, we're talking about Florida or saltwater use, 30 years on a boat is now we're starting to look at different things, different boat brands, even top tier ones. Look at Parker's, fuel tanks and transoms. Those are high ticket items. If you're looking at a 30-year-old boat that needs a transom, needs stringer work, or needs a fuel tank put in it, I mean, age is now a big factor. For good boats, Even good bows, age becomes a factor. Boston Whaler, Contender, CV, any of them. Grady Whites, that age, I would say 25 years is like the date where now all of a sudden you look at those things. 15, 20 years, no, you're good for at least 5 to 10. But after that, major components that are not, you're not just doing a $2,000 rewire, you're doing a $15,000 fuel tank replacement. All right. Tag says if you don't want to spend the money on real ceramic coatings, but buy the spray ceramic. I've never used the spray ceramic. So, I mean, that's interesting to hear that. It won't last as long as real ceramic, but I have seen firsthand it will outlast nearly any wax made. Don't use wax is the message. Wax is terrible by comparison to modern day synthetic coatings. He does kind of have a point there. I mean, wax, depending on where you live, wax, is kind of like on a boat these days. I think when I was talking to Ken with Stark and Stark, I was trying to think of Stark Yacht Care is what it's called. He was saying that the wax melts at like 107 degrees or something like that, whereas modern day synthetic coatings will last up to like 210 degrees. So yeah, if you take a boat, you put it in the middle of a lake in the middle of summer, the boat's probably hitting 107 degrees, especially if you live in South Florida. If you live in South Florida, that boat just sitting outside under the cover, that wax is just melting off that boat. So yeah, I agree. Wax it is terrible compared to modern day synthetic coatings. It just doesn't hold up. The temperature doesn't hold up. It's a carnauba wax. It'll melt. So with you, 100% Tag. What else we got going on here? Let's see. Nasty Linen says, what's going on, bro? Quick question for the show. Just spent $2,000 on a full service. Motor was coming up on 260 hours. After service, I take it out and the motor stalls on me on idle. The primer bulb and it's empty. Check the primer bulb and it's empty. Primed it before launch. I go to prime it again and just hear squishing like gas and air are going through it. Had to pump it quite a lot to get it firm again. Was able to run it back enough to get back to the launch and it killed again while idling. Primer was empty again. Shop that did the work seemingly not going to help out. Running a 2003 bass boat with a 2017 Merc 250 Pro XS. Just wondering what you think could be the cause. Also, the fuel lines, primer, and water fuel separator are all new from the service. The fuel lines, the primer bulb, and the water fuel separator are all new from the service. You had a service done and they changed your fuel lines and your primer bulb. That's kind of weird. Like, if you spent $2,000 and got the engine service, I'm guessing at 260 hours, we're talking about a 300-hour service. So 300-hour service is oil changes, anodes, belts, gear lube, oil filters, water separators, spark plugs, thermostats, maintenance items. Maintenance items are service items. Fuel lines and primer bulbs are not service items. Your fuel water separator is, but I don't know what's going on with this shop that you went to, but I don't see why wouldn't they look at, like, if you just did all this $2,000 worth of work and the engine's not running. And it doesn't seem like that's a very complicated issue, because if you change out the fuel lines and the primer bulb and your water separator, and now the engine dies at idle because it runs out of fuel, because if you prime the primer bulb, you suck fuel up, you feed fuel to the engine, and it starts and runs again, you let it idle, it runs out of fuel, you prime the primer bulb, you suck up fuel, you feed fuel to the engine, it runs again. Like, not really the most complex diagnostic process needs to go on here to figure out what's going on. You got an air leak somewhere in your fuel line and your engine's dying because it's running out of fuel. So you just change the fuel lines, you just change your primer bulb, and you just change your water separator. Most likely, I would have first said that the water separator was just empty. They put it on dry, and that canister full of air, the engine ran out of fuel. But you're saying that it's consistent, so you got an air leak, whether that be in the fuel lines that they put on. Maybe there's a cut in the fuel line, maybe there's a hose clamp that's loose on the fuel line, possibly a problem with the primer bulb, but you've got an air leak somewhere in that fuel line that just got replaced because your fuel pump on the engine is creating a vacuum trying to suck fuel from the fuel tank. It's not getting fuel from the fuel tank because there is a leak in that line and it is sucking air, which is why it's running out of fuel. So, I mean, I take it back to that shop. Like, pretty simple there. I'm not really understanding what exactly is going on with the 300-hour service where you're getting primer bulbs and fuel lines put in the boat, but most likely there was something outside of just a service, because the service isn't going to fix that. I mean, I know a lot of people like to throw around the word maintenance and service and annual and stuff like that. And service is service. Annuals are annuals. Maintenance is maintenance. We're talking about wear and tear items. We're talking about, your gear lube, oil filters, fuel filters, spark plugs, thermostats, drain seals, anodes, like things that are going to wear out that are service items. But a service doesn't cure cancer. You go and get a 100-hour service. That doesn't mean that your rotting fuel lines from 2003 are going to get fixed. That's not going to fix that. So if you went in there and they did the service and found that there was a problem with your fuel lines and they replaced your fuel lines, that's outside of your service. But not sure why they wouldn't fix it, because obviously there's something going on where there's something else going on here, which, I wonder if it had this problem before you took it in there. Like was the engine doing this when you took it there and you got the service, and then it's still doing the problem like that? There's kind of, I don't know if we could hold that one to the shop or not, but that's kind of what I'm thinking there. Nasty linen. That's what I'm reading out of that. All right, let's do one more from Bubba Gump. As usual, great podcast. Thank you, Bubba Gump. I'm an old two-stroke hand, but like the reliability of the new four-strokes. Just got back from Suzuki school. That's a smooth running 250, so I think four-strokes are better. Great job. That's more of a statement, not a comment, but thank you for the statement anyway. They are. I mean, new Suzukis, the 250, all the four-strokes these days, they're smooth. Like most of them, I don't care what brand you buy a Yamaha, you buy a Suzuki, you buy a Mercury, Tohatsu, Honda, they're quiet. They are smooth and quiet. So the technology has come a long way, and there's a lot to come. So I think the future looks bright on all of that. That's it for this week. You guys have a great week. See you next time. Hey there, sorry to take you away from the video, but real quick, did you know that on average a boat owner will spend between $1,000 and $5,000 a year just on servicing their engine? And you could actually pocket and save a lot of that money if you would just do the service yourself. It might seem like a daunting task, but I guarantee you virtually everyone can do it with our guidance and the Boaters program. This is just one skill that you could learn inside the program, because we have hundreds of other videos teaching you all kinds of boating skills, as well as a weekly live stream where we have questions and answers with me, as well as a chat feature where you can send videos and pictures, ask all kinds of questions, or look for some advice or some guidance on a project that you're doing on your boat. You can join the program by hitting the first link in the description, clicking join, or visiting bornagainboating.com. Now back to the video.